Hey friend, Graham here from recordingrevolution.com. And I always say if you could make one change to the way you mix your music to see way better results, it would be to mix in mono. In fact, one of hip hop's most sought after mix engineers, Derek Ali, who really rose to fame when he mixed Kendrick Lamar's award winning To Pimp A Butterfly, is a huge advocate of mixing in mono. And in an article on Sound, he broke down why he does this and what the process looks like for him. Ali shares this surprising fact about how he gets his mixes to sound so good. About 80% of my time mixing, I spend listening to just one Auratone speaker. So yes, in mono. Dr. Dre always told me that if I could get something to sound amazing on crappy speakers, it'll sound brilliant on normal speakers. So I try to get a great mix on the Auratone, and then I'll go to the NS10s. So the Auratone is an old school little box. It's a small, mid-rangey, crappy sounding speaker. For a while, Behringer made a clone of it called the Baritone, and they sold this for about 99 bucks. I've got one, love it. I've used it for years. I don't think they make it anymore for some sad reason, but the idea is that it's a real crappy sounding box. And when he references the NS10s, he's talking about Yamaha NS10s, which I also think sound crappy, but they're more full range near field monitors that are pretty ubiquitous in most recording studios. So 80% of To Pimp A Butterfly was mixed in mono on this crappy speaker. Very interesting. Now listen to what Ali says is the reason why he does this. I mix on just one Auratone because I like specific elements of the mix to pop out. And listening in mono on that speaker really helps me define that. It's difficult to assess your balance in stereo. Whereas when you listen in mono, you can gauge the true value of how everything sits in the mix. So two huge points about this quote. Ali's saying that when you mix in mono, it helps you identify problem frequencies to make sure everything's poking out in the mix, right? And then also it allows you to get a true balance so you're not fooled by stereo. Because here's the problem if you never listen to your mix in mono. You start to pan and you get things sounding really nice. They're spread out. I mean, I love hard panning. LCR panning is a godsend, but you put guitars on the hard left, synths, whatever. You got vocals and kick drum and bass and snare up the middle, whatever. It sounds good to you. You fool yourself by creating separation. But you don't know if your separation is going to hold up tonally. It's holding up spatially if someone listens in headphones and if they're in between speakers perfectly, which no one sits in between speakers perfectly anymore. The only time they would be getting that separation is with headphones. But when you collapse it to mono, what happens? It's harder to hear your tracks. It's harder to distinguish the guitars and the synths from each other because it's all folded on top of each other. And that's why people don't like mixing in mono. But that's exactly the point. It reveals, if you can't hear it very well, that your EQ is not right or your balance is off. It's your job to make the tracks sound good on top of each other so that there's no EQ masking or frequency masking, I should say. That's really the problem. You've got all these mid-range frequencies all potentially covering each other up, and you don't notice that until they're on top of each other. So when they're on top of each other, you can easily say, I can't really hear that guitar anymore. So I got to either EQ the guitar or EQ the vocal that's covering up the guitar or both, and I won't stop until I get a nice clarity and separation because then I know my EQ's right. Then once you pop it back out to stereo, it's going to sound even better because you've got clarity and separation through tone, which is rule number one, step number one. And then you have an additional layer of clarity and separation through stereo width and panning, which is just awesome. The other part is he's using this crappy speaker, which exposes the mid-range and allows you to get the balance right in the mid-range. Because here's the problem with nice speakers or nice headphones. The problem is that they sound nice. So that's a problem because you get nice highs, you get nice lows, you get a lot of separation and clarity and a lot of sonic real estate. And it just paints your mix, even if they're relatively flat speakers in a flat room, let's say, it still paints your mix in a really nice spot, which is important, very important. You want to hear things for how they truly are. But what Ali has figured out, and he learned this from Dr. Dre, and a lot of people have been doing this, is you need to expose the problem areas, which typically are the mid-range. And a mid-rangey speaker like the Auratone or any kind of crappy computer speaker is going to over accentuate any problems in the mid-range. So you might have a guitar that sounds decent on your monitors, but it's actually a little harsh and you don't realize it. Now, a lot of people are going to listen to your music on crappy speakers. Their car stereo is going to sound crappy. Their Apple earbuds are crappy. And that might expose some harshness in the mid-range that you don't notice in your nice sounding speakers. So you want to make sure you hear it in those crappy mid-rangey areas to make sure that you address any problems. So if there's a really harsh guitar, you can fix that with EQ or you can fix it with level, and it'll still sound good on nice speakers. And again, like I said, most people that are going to hear your mix, the people that you're making your mix for, are going to listen to your mix on crappy speakers in crappy situations where there's not a lot of top end, not a lot of low end. Those are usually the areas to get lopped off. So it's virtually a mid-rangey style mix. So if you don't know what your mix sounds like when it's mostly mid-range, you don't really have a clue as to how your mix is going to translate in the real world. So this is a very helpful tool for translatability and a very helpful tool for your track to have commercial viable success, to be able to be radio ready, like I always say. So a couple of pointers here. If you don't have an oratone or a baritone or some kind of crappy mono mid-rangey speaker, you can still do this in 2 steps. One is to just fold your mix to mono, even on your current speakers. You can do this by going to the master fader or the mix bus and taking the pan pots or knobs, if they're there, and collapsing them up the middle instead of left and right. Or you can use a stereo widening plugin. Pro Tools comes with one for free. Typically used to increase the stereo width, but you just do the opposite. You go from 100% width to 0% width, and it just collapses the stereo field to mono. And that way you can get a mono mix for as long as you need to get the EQ right. Then you need to do a second step, which is to listen back to your mix on a crappy mid-range speaker. So buy crappy computer speakers or some crappy radio, anything that allows you to reference your mix, take notes of what needs to be changed, and adjust accordingly. Again, Derek Ali spends 80% of the mix on this crappy mono mid-range speaker. Then he moves on to his near-field monitors, the Yamaha NS10s. Very interesting. It's not just a 10% check or a check at the end. This is where he does a lot of the mixing, if not the bulk of the mix decisions, making sure everything sits right, can poke out nicely in the mix, and feels balanced. Mixing in mono and mixing on a crappy mid-range speaker. 2 powerful hacks in one. And you're not hearing it just from me. You're hearing it from, again, an award-winning mix engineer, Derek Ali. So I have 2 questions for you and a free gift. One is, do you mix in mono? Okay, leave me a comment. Let me know. 1, do you mix in mono? If not, why? If yes, how's it going for you? 2, do you have a crappy mid-range speaker that you reference? Yes or no? Let me know. If you don't, are you going to get one? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just leave a comment below this video. And now for the free gift I mentioned. If you're interested in getting better mixes, mono is one of the biggest hacks out there, okay? It's so useful. But what do you do when you're mixing in mono? How do I know what kind of EQ decisions to make or what kind of compression decisions to make? How do I actually do the mix while listening in mono? If that part of the process is overwhelming to you, or you're mixing in mono, but you still find that your mixes don't sound as professional as what you hear on the radio, what you're streaming on Spotify, then I've got a super helpful tool for you. It's called my 6 Steps to a Radio Ready Song Guide. What this is I've basically reverse engineered every major song that you've ever loved, okay? Every good sounding song, sonically, I don't care what the genre is, but every professional sounding mix out there has gone through these 6 steps, okay? From song idea to what you hear on the radio or what's released on Spotify or Apple Music, there is a 6-step process. The problem is, most of us in the home studio skip usually 3 to 4 of those. Some of us skip 5, but on average, 3 is where most of us are skipping. Okay? Mixing is just one of those 6 steps. Mastering is just one of those 6 steps. There's 4 other steps. And what I decided to do is distill it all down, map it out for you from step 1 to step 6 so you don't miss a single step, and then give you tips and tricks and best practices for each step along the way. So what this will help you do is make sure that your song doesn't just go from idea to amateur, but from idea to worthy enough to be played on the radio, sonically speaking. Now, you still got to write a good song and you still got to be talented, but at least you will have the process to ensure that your song sounds as good as it possibly can. And it's a free PDF. It's meant to be read once and digested once, but then hold on to it so you can reference it every time you're making a song. So I like to print out my reference guides and put them right on my mixing desk. Maybe you want to keep it on your tablet or on your phone, but keep it next to you where you make music. And then as you're coming up with a song idea, you can go through this process and reference all the steps in the guide. It's absolutely free. My gift to you, just go to radioreadyguide.com. Put the link here in the video, radioreadyguide.com. If you want it, grab a copy of it. It's a free, easy download as my gift to you. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for liking this video. Thanks for subscribing to this channel. Appreciate all the support. I'll see you on another video real soon.